Welcome to another edition of Market Impact Insights, your podcast source for business leadership perspectives to help your business grow. Hear from experts in marketing, sales, business strategy, and more, with practical advice for business success. Make sure you won't miss the latest episodes by visiting marketimpactnow.com. Now, here's your host, Dan Albaum.
Welcome back to another amazing episode of Market Impact Insights. We are in truly unique times. There is so much happening in terms of technology and innovation, artificial intelligence. It's reshaping really how we are strategizing, how we're thinking about executing across all functions in organizations. And we're going to dive into really understanding the role of leadership in this wacky, crazy, fast-moving, highly competitive AI world with Jonathan Aberman, who is an entrepreneur, an investor, and an innovation strategist who's redefining how we measure human potential in an AI-driven world. He's the co-founder of Hupside, and he is championing a whole new category. It's called original intelligence, that identifies and quantifies originality as a business differentiator. He's also a partner at Ruxton Ventures, where he applies his expertise in venture investing and technology commercialization to support high growth companies. He also has a unique bridge in terms of higher education and then the business world. He has served as the Dean of the School of Business and Technology at Marymount University from 2019 to 2023, and he is currently serving as a visiting entrepreneur and strategic advisor to the Frank J. Gardini School of Business at John Cabot University in Rome. Jonathan, welcome to Market Impact Insights.
Well, thanks a lot for having me in that very gracious introduction. I just hope I can live up to it for you and your listeners.
Well, this is just fascinating, and you have really been in a path in and around technology for quite a while. What originally sparked your passion to head down that road?
Well, I grew up in family businesses. My parents both owned their own companies, and my grandparents both owned their own companies. So I always sort of took it for granted one day that I would get involved in, owning my own company at some point. And I think that my parents and my grandparents both didn't want me to be entrepreneurial and wanted me to be very successful in the establishment. So I went off and had a career as an investment banker and a lawyer, a partner of big law firms and managing partner in a couple of situations. And ultimately found that I really wanted to be involved in business and own my own business as well. And in the early aughts, I left practicing law and became a venture capitalist by starting my own venture fund, Amplifier Ventures. And I've been around technology first as a venture capital lawyer, but then as an investor. I've been around technology and software now for 25, close to 30 years. I've seen a lot of different things. And there are a few things as interesting as working in the crossroads of innovation and entrepreneurship in our society. I'm really quite fortunate. It's just a passion of mine. I mean, I teach entrepreneurship. I practice it. Have helped start more than 40 software companies as an advisor. And now finally, I've got my own AI startup that I'm the CEO of. And it's been a really rewarding experience to this point in time. I'm very fortunate.
So when you reflect back on your journey, what's been some of the biggest personal learning you've taken from that? And have there been surprises for you along the way?
Well, I think that I think that when I started out in life, I didn't really appreciate how much entrepreneurship really as a life journey rather than a way to make money is the best way to describe it. I got the advice very early on in life that if you wanted to be rich, you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur, which I always thought was interesting. But, I made a lot more money for many years as a partner in a law firm than I did as an entrepreneur. But what entrepreneurship really showed me was that it really does answer for you the two big life questions I think many of us have. Why am I here? What do I do? And entrepreneurship really does provide an opportunity for a lot more salience and human opportunity and satisfaction. And I think the biggest surprise about my life maybe is that I started out thinking that the way I should be successful was measured on the basis of how much money I would make with my upbringing. And what I've actually learned over the years is that the more people that I influence through my activities, the more satisfying my life is. And if you told me that at 21, I would have told you were insane. So maybe that's the biggest surprise I've seen is how my life's unfolded in a happy way, not in a negative way.
Yeah. And, you talked about one of the realities of entrepreneurism that is so different than when you're just collecting a steady paycheck in a corporate environment. And I think it's a big barrier for a lot of people that's kind of intimidating for them to not take that step into being an entrepreneur and founding their company, which is the inevitable ups and downs. It's just a lot more volatile, isn't it? And so was that difficult for you to kind of step outside, something that was maybe more predictable and then into, hey, I'm taking on some risk here and it's going to be a little more volatile?
Well, actually, what's funny is that it wasn't actually that difficult for me at all, because what I realized when I looked at my career to date, when I decided to stop being a partner in a law firm, I had started out as an investment banker, helping Goldman Sachs open up their M&A department in London as an associate for a while. And then I helped another bank open up a London office. And I joined a series of American law firms where I was helping them open up offices. And then I became the managing partner of the East Coast operations of a big California firm and helped open up offices. And what I realized was that I was actually an entrepreneurial person in the context of professional environment. So for me, the ambiguity of not knowing what the next day would hold was not unfamiliar to me at all. I think that what I can tell you is that people who become entrepreneurial don't become entrepreneurial. They actually are entrepreneurial by nature. They tend to be self-starters. They tend to fail upward. They tend to enjoy the rough and tumble. They tend to be more optimistic. They can be introverted or extroverted. But at the end of the day, you have to believe that you can shape the universe to your bidding, and that's the push of being an entrepreneur. It's the entrepreneur characteristic. The pull is finding an opportunity to exercise that. And, we tend to think about that in this world as being the pull being a company starter. And it is true that some entrepreneurial people satisfy their entrepreneurial behavior by being company starters. But, a lot of entrepreneurial people never start companies. They work within companies and make a difference. Funnily enough, politicians are very entrepreneurial often. They have to raise money and share their ideas. And I've seen some amazing leaders of churches and synagogues and mosques who are incredibly entrepreneurial. It's just human behavior. So, you find something that you're passionate about that feeds your inner desire to make a difference, and it just sort of snowballs from there. That's certainly been my experience with everything that I've done. I'm always an entrepreneurial person, but I find something that really excites me and that pulls me into a new venue, which is how my career is sort of unfolded.
Yeah, it all starts from within, right? You mentioned
Absolutely.
The passion and having it be authentic and genuine.
Yes, I think so. One of the things that I tend to look for in people when I get involved with them is self-awareness. I think that if people are self-aware, that generally means they are psychologically able to abstract out of themselves and to adjust. Every entrepreneur that I've known who's been successful had the ability to pivot, and that requires basically self-awareness and the ability to take on data. People who are narcissistic, sociopathic, things of that nature, one of the big flaws they have is they can't actually take data and change behavior, which makes them great if they're in a structure where they don't have to change your behavior, like being maybe a CEO of an established company, but it doesn't work very well if you have to deal with the rough and tumble. So when you say authenticity, generally people who are self-aware come across as more authentic because, frankly, they know themselves and they're comfortable in their own skin. So when they manifest their behavior, you can sense that they're comfortable and what they're telling you is based on some objective sense of right and wrong and truth. And we experience that as authenticity. So, authenticity is highly important in every relationship that I think I have had professionally or personally. Anybody I've ever put my brand or energy behind, if I don't feel they're self-aware and in touch with their own values, I find it very hard to work with them.
And you've had this interesting span between education and then in the business world as well. And so how do you see that experience you've had in higher education positively impacting how you've been able to create success as a business leader?
Well, I think that, we're going to, as we get from where I've been to, we start to talk about leadership. I think that one of the most important things about any leader is to understand their leadership style and to match leadership style to the organization that they want to be in. And, when you cut through it all, there really are only two fundamental leadership styles. There's autocratic leadership and there's servant leadership. And I think that, top-down leadership can be very effective in certain types of organizations, ones with are very role-based, very restrictive. But the reality is that most agile enterprises and most enterprises that need to grow on the basis of people buying in require servant leadership. And servant leaders have to be able to communicate mission and have to be able to acknowledge people and have to be able to bring the best out of them. And what's interesting is that, having taught entrepreneurship and creativity and organizational development for many years and practiced it myself, what I realized was that skill set is just as applicable to managing a billion-dollar transaction as a banker or as a lawyer, which I've done, to managing and building a business school and a university, to managing and growing a startup. It's all about being able to communicate your authenticity. It's all about being able to communicate your vision, but also it's all about delegating to people the authority that they need to feel excited about what they're doing. And they then will give you authority back because you're in this tight loop. So I think that I may be very different from many business people who go into academia, who find that the academic enterprise, which can look very, very top down and very structured. You have a president, a provost, a board, deans. It looks very structured. But as a practical matter, if a university is going to grow, it actually has to be much more agile. And so if you're lucky enough, like I was, to come into an academic setting that needed change, which is frankly why they hired me, you can get an awful lot done by being a servant leader. So my experience at Merriman ended up not being very different day to day than, funnily enough, my experience, managing Hupside or my experience coaching entrepreneurs. It's all about vision setting and acknowledging people's contributions and getting the best out of them by giving them the opportunities to flourish. Servant leadership, basically.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, as I think the current environment and the challenges that a lot of universities have in terms of their continued prosperity and growth in terms of attracting students. It's probably never been more competitive than it is now to get those students, right? And so maybe there's some of these new pressures and challenges that maybe is a forcing function to really have more of that agile mindset that in a, going back a generation maybe wasn't as prevalent in academia. Do you see that as also being a factor?
Absolutely. So higher education is in the middle of a tsunami with a number of different contributing factors that are rapidly changing the economics of higher ed. The first one is, without question, there's a demographic cliff. There are fewer 18-year-olds that want to or are able to go to university. There's fewer of them. So the addressable market is actually shrinking. And as you know from other conversations I'm sure you've had, addressable market that's shrinking is a problem for any business. And it certainly creates a more competitive market. So you've got that. Then you also have this administration, Trump administration's changing in government spending patterns and the changing role of the Department of Education in education, which is having an effect on the available money to support the academic enterprise. Then you add on top of that the changes in treatment of immigration and the unbelievable fall off you're now seeing in national students. All those things alone are cutting supply of both funding and market opportunity from the standpoint of students. But then you add on top of that how AI is just changing dramatically the interrelationships between humans and technology. And universities have a real problem right now because most of them are trying to figure out whether AI is a cheating problem or an educational opportunity. And I have views on that, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but the universities that don't know what to do, combined with the other things that we've described, are having a very difficult time right now, because the world is changing so fast. And it's not generally a structure that's suitable for rapid change because they tend to be top-down autocratic organizations. So honestly, I don't know what's going to happen in higher education. I mean, when we get to the other side, what I expect is going to happen is you're going to have a smaller number of highly agile universities that are going to understand how to educate students to make them work well with AI. And they're going to be incredibly valuable and going to be very, very much demand. But I think that universities or colleges that sort of were basically, just to be blunt, finishing school for a kid who didn't want to quite leave the roost and go out and get punched out in the world. I think that model is under a lot of stress.
Well, let's get into the AI discussion because I know you're very focused around that, and there's so many opinions and a lot of different perceptions of what AI is, what it's not. What do you see as some of the biggest misperceptions that are still out there about AI?
Well, so it goes to when and why I started Hupside with my colleagues. About 18 months or so ago, I was doing a panel on creativity and investment for the local Arlington Council, and I've been doing a lot of work, over the years around what AI was going to do to human labor, and had fallen on creativity as the one thing that people can do that I felt AI couldn't. And eventually, I found through my promotional activities around this issue, I found two professors, one at Georgetown University named Adam Green and one at Washington Lee named Dan Johnson. And, they said to me, look, you need to understand something. I said, what's that? He said, AI by its nature is a probabilistic engine as the Gen AI models work, and they are going to tend towards sameness. And the more that they tend towards sameness, the more that human output is going to be dominated by AI if we're not careful. And we're going to live in a society where everybody's going to generate the same output, and society is going to become less diverse, and businesses are going to become less diverse and lose their competitive advantage. And they showed me some early outcomes of the model that they built that showed me what happened to an AI, a company after they started working with AI. And I got to tell you, it was exceptionally upsetting. And it got my attention because you took 1,000 diverse people and they started to use AI, and their divergence in opinions rapidly centered around 2 or 3 data points, which was the AI's most common answer. So this tendencies towards homogenization of information is just being talked about right now, just being talked about. You're starting to see it in the media a little bit. But the thing that is really important about this is that if you understand that AI, as it's designed and has its architect, tends towards sameness, it makes human value add exceptionally important because we create the differentiation. And so I think the biggest problem right now in how AI is being deployed in our society is it's being presented as an efficiency measure and an either-or choice. And what Hupside can show is that if you get people and understand their originality competency, they are actually better able at working with AI and generating more interesting output with AI used as an assistant than either AI or humans can do on its own. And that is, I think, the pathway forward to how we keep people engaged, how we keep people employed, and how we have a society where AI is not drowning us in what we're often describing now as AI work slop. So that to me is the biggest thing right now, that biggest misapprehension we have to fix collectively in order to move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the one hand, we can think about all of this additional new capability we have that we can leverage AI for. It's going to make us more creative. We can do more things. And actually, the reality, what you're talking about is, no, actually, it's built to kind of create more homogenization. So it's actually going the other direction. And so it's the human element, the human mind and the hands that are involved working in tandem with AI that preserves the originality that is so important to our existence.
Right. And let me just help make sure we level set everybody who's listening. So what we're getting at is originality is the result of a process. It can be an AI process. It can be a human process. But when you go through this, do you end up with something that expands the idea space, expands the currently available knowledge? And what that means is that, humans expand the idea space through creativity, but, we also expand the idea space through judgment, through inference, instinct, right? It's not just creativity, it's output. And AI can sometimes, quote, be creative. It can come up with random ideas. What we're getting at is that when you take ultimately an output, originality, ultimately originality has value if we as humans determine it has value, right? I mean, an AI can give you an answer that's complete nonsense to you. It's original, but it's not useful. I can give you an answer that's complete nonsense. It can be original, but not useful. So the point is that if you measure originality, the output, this does a number of things for you. The first thing it does is for the first time, you can objectively say, all right, I got this output. It can be a piece of content. It can be, how do you answer a standardized test of some sort? Did this person evidence the ability to create something that was not seen before, wouldn't be seen before? Yes or no? Okay. Did they do that in a way that AI couldn't have done? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Or no. Could they create output that was more original if they used AI properly? Yes or no? And so for the first time, we have the ability to truly understand how hybrid workers can function, how humans can function on their own, and how AI can function on its own. And that's what's really important. So it's bigger than creativity. It's literally the holy grail. It's demonstrating that all these tools actually will make us better at generating things that we care about and use. And that's why I'm so excited about it, and frankly, why I came out of being an investor again and decided to take on the mayhem of being a startup founder, which is, I'm sure you know from other guests, is it's not like it's a part-time job, let me tell you.
No, it's buckle up and get ready for the ride. And so with all of this fast pace of innovation that's happening with AI, it just seems like every day we've got change and evolution. What are some of the challenges that the business leaders are having that you're seeing with just trying to either keep up or really kind of prioritize and focus how to leverage that fast pace of innovation?
Well, I think one of the big challenges that larger companies have right now is satisfying the board's directors and shareholders that they are going to manage margins by taking advantage of AI to rationalize the workforce. Jack Dorsey, for example, a few weeks ago, or just you can see it. I mean, a lot of the public companies are announcing we're laying people off because of AI. So there's this enormous pressure. The larger an enterprise is, particularly if it's a public company, you should bring AI in and use it as an adjunct for human labor. That's a really big thing. Smaller businesses are looking at it and saying, well, geez, this is expensive. I don't know if I can really do this the same way the big guys are doing. So am I going to end up, basically falling behind? So there's a lot of pressure everywhere in business now to be deploying AI in some way, right? The issue, though, fundamentally is right now, human beings, we only tend to use technology in a way that's analogous to the last technology we've been taught how to use. And the last two technologies that we've really been taught how to use as an adjunct for our own wanting to get things done are search and social media. And if you look at how most people, not outliers, but most people use Claude, ChatGPT, and Grok and so forth, they use it as search and they use it for chatbot. So not surprisingly, when you put these tools into the workforce and you don't understand the originality capability and how people approach problem solving, you give them the tools, roughly 10% of a group, based upon our research and how our model identifies people's competency, roughly 10% will take a tool and will use it like crazy because they can't stop themselves. They're expanders. They just love doing new things. And the other 90%, to a greater or lesser extent, need to have the technology's implications explained to them and need to have structure put in place so they can understand how to use it. And so what happens is there's this enormous pressure to get everybody to use AI. The CEOs say to CTO, use AI, use agents, use this, use that. And then they can't get their people to actually use it well, or worse, they create nonsense output, work slop, or they create cybersecurity risks because they're setting up ghost AI stacks on their own and leaking information out the door. So a lot of the CEOs right now are thinking, I'm spending all this money. What the heck am I getting out of it? About 6 months ago, a study came out from MIT and said 95% of AI transformation projects weren't generating an ROI. So to use a highly technical term, it's a mess. It's just a mess right now. And the pressure is enormous, and people are frightened about losing their jobs because for most folks, what's being portrayed in the media is AI is here to take your jobs. And, and for me, it comes back to, again, my company mission and my mission for the overall conversation, which is actually, if a business wants to differentiate, it needs humans because humans create differentiated output. So, you need to understand your people and get them to use AI as an adjunct to their originality capability and not an instead. And the organizations that do that well are going to be much more profitable than ones that don't, and what I'm seeing so far, we started selling our product no more than 3 months ago. It was brand new technology. I raced to get it to HubChecker to market. The people that are really running it this hardest are people who tend to be servant leaders. They're the ones that really get this, and it gives them for the first time a tool to be able to make some intelligent decisions about how to deploy AI and get people to use it. And that's what we're seeing more and more. This is not a tool autocrats are interested in, but it's a tool that servant leaders really, really like. Not that the autocrat leaders shouldn't use it, because they should, because ultimately margins improvements in the people, not in efficiency. But early adopters are definitely tending to be more servant leaders, without question.
So something I know that you've talked about is go-to-market strategies. And in the midst of where we're at with so much competitive pressure and the race to kind of get it right in terms of how we partner and look at AI as complementary to our human differentiation, how can those leadership teams best future-proof their go-to-market strategies?
Well, I think that the first thing that everybody has to do is have a clear-eyed view about how the value chain in an AI enterprise works. And what I mean by that is, you look at layers. There's the data layer, there is the cybersecurity layer, there's an AI layer, and there's now an originality layer. And depending upon where you're going to deploy AI in the enterprise, that originality layer can be a lot or a little of your overall value chain. For example, if you're going to use a bunch of agents to automate customer support, which I think is a great use case, you're still going to have some human insight putting those models, together, linking them, and you're going to need to have humans who are going to monitor output when things need to be elevated, because humans like dealing with humans when stuff goes wrong. On the other hand, if you're in a C-suite, you're going to use AI, I'm sure, I do, for a lot of analysis work, but I'm going to provide my own business judgment and insights and how to apply it. So to me, it really begins with understanding that AI is a tool. It's not anything different from a typewriter or a spell checker. It's a tool, and it's a great tool, but it's part of the overall margin and value chain of a business. So I think I would say starting there. And as far as future-proofing goes, well, there's no doubt that the Gen A models continue to ingest information and continue to be better and better at drawing inferences. They will continue to be sameness engines because of their architecture, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to become better at bringing concepts to bear. So understanding how to use these models as an adjunct to your business processes, an adjunct to your team's originality, will continue to be relevant. This is going to be a constant push-pull between technology and people. And the best run enterprises are going to understand how to balance that. And the best way to future-proof yourself, in my opinion, is to always focus on where your value add and where your differentiation is. It's business school 101. You create a competitive advantage and they have to sustain it. And, you don't sustain a competitive advantage for the most part by being efficient. You can, because everybody will become equally efficient when they're using AI. You compete by doing something that's your competitor can't do. So that's how you future-proof yourself. You just keep providing things that other people can't, that are distinctive to you. By the way, this is why I'm very high on small businesses, because these tools are so efficient and they're so broadly available. A small team really can compete with a larger enterprise at scale. You think about using Claude, for example, to do coding. A small team can build prototypes, even, product examples, or build workflows or agents. I mean, you can get a lot done with a smaller number of people now, if they're the right people and they have really good original ideas. So that's why I look at the world unfolding. It's going to require a lot of mental and psychological and business agility. But I think that that's actually not a bad thing. That's my optimistic view. I think there's a lot of opportunity for people that are agile to make a very successful way in this AI-driven world, if we allow them to.
Jonathan, what do you think separates truly exceptional leadership from just good enough?
In my experience, exceptional leadership, there's an element of self-reflection and humbleness combined with an awful lot of surety. I mean, people need to believe in their leaders. It's the way we're wired up. And I think it's because there's this fundamental tension that all of us have where we want to matter and we want to feel special. So if we're going to give our power to somebody, we want to somehow feel better about that, like they are higher, better, they're doing something that we couldn't do, or they make me feel better about myself, this tight relationship. And there are a lot of ways to do that. You can be an incredible visionary, somebody like an Obama who just talked, or Trump, when he was running for president different times, but sharing a vision that people get excited about. Or, it can be a great CEO. And we've seen many. But it comes down to me, the ability to have the exceptional balance of humbleness and authenticity with tremendous confidence and foresight. And the other part of it is, you really do have to be visionary. If you really, really are going to be a transformative person, you need to have the ability to think 3 steps ahead. You need to visualize the future of 5 or 10 years from now that you're trying to get your team to, and then be able to express that. So I think that it is entirely possible to be a great leader and be a great manager, right? And some of the best managers I know are great leaders, because they're able to function within a structured situation and get stuff done and make people buy in. But the truly transformative leaders are people who are able to tell a story of a future that hasn't happened yet and get buy-in. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, there's this famous observation about human behavior and human psychology that says that people won't necessarily remember every word you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Exactly.
Back to that inspirational opportunity for leaders.
That's exactly right. Look, I think that one of the things that I've always felt very strongly is there clearly have been times in my life, like now I'm doing this company, but other times where a lot of people put their trust in me. Hupside is a big vision for how society really should deal with this AI transformation. And every time I appear on a show with you or others, or I talk about this, or we talk about the product, or I build a product, I have a tremendous amount of a tremendous sense of responsibility. Asking people to follow you, in my opinion, shouldn't just be about congratulating yourself that you're powerful. I think it's really more taking it seriously. That if somebody gives you the ability to lead them, that is one of the biggest gifts that anybody can give you, and one of the most trusting things that somebody can do. And I think it's really important for our society to function well and for business to function well, that those of us that are given this gift of trust honor it by coming to work or coming to things every day and saying, what am I doing to help you make your life better because you trust me? And I just think that's the most important thing for everybody. That makes a good leader. And look, I know that it's value laden, and some would criticize me on the partisan divide for, those other woke values or whatever. I just can't abide by that. To me, this is just, I don't care where you come from on the divide. If you don't recognize the importance of the people that you lead, then I don't think you're satisfying your responsibility to them. I just don't.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
The best piece of business advice I've ever received? Well, early on, I think I told you in my career, I was told if you want to be an entrepreneur to be rich, keep practicing law. And that turned out to be absolutely true for, off and on throughout my career. I've had years where I've made nothing and years when I've done, pretty well. And so I think that was really helpful just from the standpoint of orienting my life. From the standpoint of business, I think that entrepreneurs can really fall in love with their business idea and their technology, and really forget that technology is really just an enablement to sell something to people that care about what you're selling them. Over the years in classes in the business schools, the MBAs, and I often will say to them, all right, what causes growth in a company? And, you get all these answers, it's brand, it's value add, it's this, it's that, all highly technical answers. That, guys, what causes business growth is more people want your stuff than you currently have available. If you have that, you have growth. If you don't have that, you don't have growth. So it really is, what was it James Carville used to say? It's the economy, stupid. I think with business, it's the customer. And customer can be students if you're a dean. Customer can mean the people you serve if you run a not-for-profit. Customers can mean the people who buy your product. But at the end of the day, if you're not getting people to engage with what you're building and doing and want to use it, then you don't have a business, you have a hobby. Hobbies are great, but business is getting people to bend to your will and to love what you're doing and consume it.
So when you think about the future, what makes you optimistic?
I think that what we're seeing, what we're seeing now with respect to the AI transformation, and we're starting to see it in the conversation around Anthropic a couple of weeks ago, and I think we're going to continue to see it, is there's a growing understanding that AI transformation is not an either-or choice. It ultimately is an and choice. And if you look at the different models for AI adoption around the world, you can see where maybe in this country right now, we're a little more pro, it's an either or. But if you go outside the US and you look at, say, Canada or the European community, or even China in a funny way, you're seeing a greater understanding that AI and humans working together can do great things. So I think that the tech optimists who talk about, well, AI is going to do everything, I don't agree with that. I'm more optimistic that what we're going to find at the end is that humans are going to end up in a position where more of the things they imagine will be doable, as long as they live in a political system that allows them to benefit from their labor and their creativity. So I think the human nature over the last 5,000 years has shown, as we come into civilization, people want to matter. And when people try to matter, they use tools. And when people use tools, they create opportunities for themselves and they make society progress. And I think ultimately AI is just another in a long line of tools, starting with fire and the wheel, that people will use to make their lives better. And so that's what makes me optimistic. Of course, that can make me pessimistic because a lot will depend upon how society decides to reward the people and who gets rewarded if they're original. And I think that's really the biggest thing that technology has to deal with over the next few years, is who actually gets the benefit of the efficiency and the creativity output that will come from using AI. I think it's an open question right now.
Yeah, and it doesn't remove the element of choice, leadership, choice, and intention, right? There's nothing that is totally inevitable. There are choices to be made, and that's what still needs to play out, right?
Absolutely. In fact, if you Google me and check my writings over the years, that is a recurring theme in the columns I've written in newspapers, op-eds, my teaching. I'm a big believer in that technology is not deterministic, and it shouldn't be presented as if it is. AI does not have to substitute for every job. And for me to say that doesn't mean I'm against AI. It means that you can make a choice. I mean, you could, as a person, say, look, I will never use AI to substitute for my thinking. I will never take an AI answer and hand it as my own work. That's a choice, right? I can say, I'll use AI and I will drive it and I'll learn how to use Claude and I'll learn how to use ChatGPT and I will drive it as an assistant to never take the first, second, third, or fifth answer, which will make it better, make me better. That's a choice. Or you can say, as a society, we really don't want to have monopolies. We want to enforce the antitrust laws and make sure that there's no concentration of economic power around AI. You could make that choice, or you could make a choice to say, AI models have cultural artifacts. We need to really think about whose cultural artifacts are in the models. I mean, I could go on and on. The point being is, right now, there's an element of, if you raise these questions, you're against AI. First of all, I'm not against AI. I'm an AI entrepreneur, and I'm trying to make money as a VC and as an investor and as a founder in AI. So I believe in capitalism. But you can be a capitalist and still say that having a conversation about social aspects of a technology and the choices, you can be pro-capitalism and pro-choices and pro-ethics and pro-morality at the same time. At least I think so. So yeah, choices 100%. And feeling like you're not disabled by things. I think that's the most important message I would want everybody listening is, you're not disabled. And nothing about life right now is deterministic. It's all based upon choices that we can make. And that may be the most important thing of all.
And do you have any other final advice for leaders that are trying to create more positive impact in an AI world and elevate the performance of their teams?
Well, obviously it would be built self-serving, but I'd invite them to get in touch with me, Jonathan, at Hupside.com, or check out Hupside.com and see how you could use these tools that we've introduced to understand your people better, so you can better advocate for them or get them in a position where they can work with AI in a productive and a happy way. But besides that, I think the most important thing right now is the world is so freaking chaotic right now. There is a tremendous potential to just live day to day like it's triage. I just got to get through the day, get through the week. I mean, what's going to change now? Are we at war, not at war? Tariffs, not tariffs? Deficit? You could go nuts. So I feel that when leaders or employees are in this kind of environment, there is a tendency to feel a desire for disengagement or to feel disablement. I see this a lot in the classroom right now. Students are really, really having a hard time believing that they can affect their lives. There's a lot of disempowerment because people are overwhelmed. So I think my best advice would be to any leader is to start to figure out how to abstract out of the here and now of externalities that are what they are, and create for yourself the white space to start to think tactically about how you could vision a better situation for yourself and for your company. And then to devote yourself to creating that bubble within your organization through culture and sharing and compensation and all the things that we do. Create a bubble of optimism and effectiveness that people can be part of. I think that's the most important advice I can give, is to not let the stuff keep you from doing the things that you know how to do. And maybe actually look at the world and double down on being a great leader, because you're in a world right now where if you commit to being the right kind of leader and to care about your people and be a servant leader and bring them along in this positive vision you have, you may give them a sense of peace of mind that they will love you forever, but more importantly, they'll be loyal to you and they'll want to do anything to work with you, because you're giving them the one thing right now they don't have, which is a sense of stability and a sense of being part of something positive. This is a great moment to be a leader if you are willing to embrace that.
And that's the perfect exclamation point as we wrap up the conversation. Jonathan, thanks again for joining, for that reminder that there is a strong and enduring human factor, even in an AI world with all the crazy innovation and all the change. It's our intentional choices as leaders that will make a difference for lasting impact. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Me too. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciated the opportunity a lot.
And a reminder, please continue to give the gift of your feedback to help make this podcast even better. You can do that by going out and giving a rating and a review. It's so easy to do on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And as always, make sure to visit marketimpactnow.com for the latest in business leadership perspectives. So long until next time.